I am so happy to be here. I am live and it is the 24th of March. It is 11 a.m. Pacific time, and here we are. I want to let you know that we're over in the chat room. You can find us by heading over to 12radio.com. That's number one, number two, radio.com. Click on the chat button and you'll be redirected into the Facebook chat room. Easy enough to find. And I also want to let you know that I am live streaming this event from Facebook Live right in the chat room. I'm also live streaming from YouTube. So if you would rather watch it on YouTube, that is Domestic Mystic on YouTube. So one way or another, here we are. Coffee in hand. I hope that you guys are having a good week, whatever that looks like right now. And I'm excited. I have a fun show for you guys. I've been doing a lot of thinking about our current times. I have a lot of things I want to share today, really, but I want to get myself to the chat room here quickly so that I can be a part of the action. You're going to see my banner at the top of the page, and that's where most people come to visit, add an opinion or share something with me. But you can also do that in the live stream, or you can do it in the live stream on YouTube. I am keeping an eye on all of them. So however you choose to interact should be just fine. The show today, I want to give you a heads up before I do some of my regular stuff, because I would love for you to share. I was thinking a lot this weekend about what our grandmothers lived through, and that we feel like we're having a hard time right now, and we are. I don't want to, I'm not saying we're not. We are. And yet our grandmas lived through unthinkable circumstances. And perhaps what is me glean a little bit of support from them, perhaps fall back on their experience a little bit to maybe strengthen ourselves. And so one thing I would love for you guys to do, I have a few of my own grandmothers that I want to share with you today, but if you want to share one of your grandmothers with me, I would cherish that. Or relative, it doesn't have to be a grandmother, it could be a grandfather or a great aunt or a whatever, a very distant relative. But if you have a story about someone who is a survivor or an inspirer, or just something that you feel compelled to share, please do so in one of the chats, and I will do my best to share them on the air. I would really like to, for a moment, use the experiences of those who came before us to inspire us. That's one thing we can definitely do. And I know that you all have ancestors who came from all kinds of life circumstances. So that's what we're doing today. I think that this will be a good way for us to uplift each other and to remember that we are okay and that we're going to be okay and that life continues to march on. I wanted to share the daily dish with you today first. As many of you know, I send out a daily reading, comes out first thing every morning, and you can subscribe to it over at katie-weaver.com. If you haven't already, just go over there. A pop-up will come up and give you the opportunity. I'll send you 7 emails of, the daily dish, and I'll send you 1 email with Luminous Magazine. So just 8 emails a week from me. I promise it won't be more than that. Unless I make a mistake like I did a couple of weeks ago and had to resend Luminous. So embarrassing, but life goes on. Here's the daily dish for today. You are so frequently the sounding board for others. You offer kindness, compassion, and sound advice. That is wonderful, of course. Today, though, you need someone that you can be vulnerable with. You need to share your fears and frustrations with no judgment. Even strong people fall down sometimes. Today might be your day. Find someone to talk to, cry it out, and then come back to center. You will feel so much better after letting it all out. There is a stigma in the spiritual world, in the world of New Agey spirituality, that we can't just be real, right? That we can't have emotions. Don't you dare express fear. Don't you dare express something negative. Well, I call BS on that. We are in a time where you're going to have some fear. You're going to have some negative emotion, whatever you want to call that. There's nothing wrong with that. It becomes a problem sometimes for you if you unpack your bags and live there, right? That's the problem. But have those emotions and allow yourself to feel them. Anyone who tells you otherwise is fooling you. Anyone who tells you otherwise, frankly, is not being authentic themselves because you know damn well they're having some of those emotions themselves. We are in a weird and unprecedented and kind of scary time. If you need to feel, please do so. Don't judge yourself for it. You have every right to, right? So, with that being said, give yourself plenty of opportunities to feel. Obviously, try not to live there. That's the point. If you find yourself dipping into kind of a dark place, well, then talk to somebody, let it out, vent it out, or write it down. Do something to release it from your body. But don't you dare, during times like this, convince yourself that you don't have the right to feel the emotions that you are feeling. I'm just not going to have it. We can't accept that as an answer, right? Right. Okay. There's my rant. But I did want to share that with you because I felt like that was something we probably all need to hear from time to time, especially during a time like this. So, all righty. Well, moving on from that, I'm seeing some stories popping up in the chat room. You guys are the best. I do want to share Luminous Magazine with you, of course, published just a little while ago, hot off the press. I'm going to put a link in the chat room, but I was going to say you can find it on my website, but you can't because I haven't put it there yet. My kids left this morning, my two older kids that have been home for the last week, and they're back to Boise. The oldest is just going to go shelter in Boise for a little while, and then he'll be back. And Matea, my daughter, was home because she was convalescing from having her wisdom teeth out, and she's now headed back to Boise to go back to work. So she does work in healthcare, but she's got a pretty cushy job right now, not directly in healthcare, but working for a large tech company, keeping an eye on the health of their people. So I feel pretty good about that. I feel like she's probably not being exposed to as much as she could be. But you can find Luminous, however, if you head over to Luminous Magazine on Facebook. So that's pretty easy. But I just want to go through a couple of things. I did call the magazine this week Hope Springs Eternal because we've got to hold on to hope right now, right? That's one thing we do have. We have hope for a better tomorrow. We have hope for positive changes moving forward. We have hope for the world, and we certainly have hope for ourselves. So that is what we're rolling on right now. My musings this week were very similar to what I'm going to share today on the show, talking about some of my grandmothers and their challenges and how I'm going to use that to strengthen myself. Kai's article was about enhancing compassion. I absolutely loved what she had to say, something that we absolutely need to be working on right now, right? Please enhance compassion. The tip of the week is to use sage. Sage is considered a sacred herb in North American indigenous spirituality. Excuse me, it is a purification herb. And so people use it to burn it and smudge their homes or their offices or their stuff. Right now, while you're home a lot, I would highly recommend clearing your space frequently from whatever is blasting out of the internet or the TV, maybe from what you're feeling and going through. And whatever, those of you that live with other people, there could be some frustrations pop up. So smudge frequently. That's going to help you to release any energy you guys don't want in your space. And, we're all creating a bit of it currently. So that's a good thing. There's so many other great things. Melissa shared a quote from Jean-Pierre Barral. Eat healthy, sleep well, breathe deeply, move harmoniously. Seems like good advice right now. So I will let you guys go through the rest of Luminous, but lots of great articles this week, lots of good advice, lots of great upliftment. So I hope you find some gems in there that help give you something that you are seeking as well. Okay. I wanted to do in our singing bowl work this week, I wanted to do a little bit of work on the sacral. we've been doing a lot of grounding because people have felt kind of ungrounded, Not unsurprising considering that we are experiencing shakeups of jobs, of finances, of safety and security, right? So, no big surprise there. However, the sacral is something I keep hearing from people. I'm home. I'm chilling. I don't really have anything to do. Why don't I feel more creative? I've heard that over and over again. Why don't I feel more creative? I feel like I should be doing something and I'm not doing something and it's driving me crazy. Well, let's work on the sacral. I think that it's very possible that some of you are experiencing some kind of a block or situation in your sacral chakra that's maybe holding you back. So, who wants that, right? So, brought out my bowl. This is a Tibetan singing bowl in the note of D. D is the note that resonates with the sacral. The sacral chakra is it's below your belly button. For women, right at the womb area, it is usually orange. This is your center of joy, of creativity, and of sexuality. So today we're really focusing on creativity, really turning that up higher, burning it brighter. I'm going to play the bowl twice. The first time I play, I would like you to just focus your energy on the sacral chakra. Just shift your consciousness there. Nothing too fancy. Doesn't have to be hard. While you do that, hold space that the frequency of the singing bowl can remove and clear out any blocks that you might be holding in your sacral, just releasing them and letting them go. So we'll start there. Okay, perfect. All right. First step, right? Now, this time, we're going to hold space that the frequency of the singing bowl adds some heat. We want to add some heat, some energy. We want to start that sacral on fire. I would like for you to envision it opening wider and wider with that bright orange energy, like a big wheel of energy right in front of your belly, burning hotter and brighter, really waking up that creative center in you. Good. Are you on fire yet? Do you feel that heat? Well, you do or you don't, but a few suggestions for helping to open up that sacral would be whether you're feeling all that creative or not, this is one of those times when faking it till you make it is valid. So perhaps you try a new recipe today. Perhaps you write something. Perhaps you sing. Perhaps you decide to grow something and do a little gardening. Perhaps you decide to draw. It doesn't matter, or color, or 1,000 different things, right? I mean, I could sit here all day and throw out suggestions, but you know what is your jam. or what isn't and something you've wanted to try. Something really fun right now is that the pardon me, availability to online classes has increased a lot right now. And there are some platforms that are giving away a lot of free courses. There has never been a better time while most of y'all are quarantined at home and there's all kinds of online capabilities to learn something, to express some creativity, to grow some creativity. Now is your moment, right? You probably have time. I've read some memes that really cracked me up. One about one that said, I used to always think that my house never got cleaned because I didn't have time. This week has proved that that is untrue. I thought that was so funny. What I've done at my house is because we were all here, I basically have just told everybody, I need you for an hour today and just put them all to work, myself included. But I told my kids, we are 5 adults quarantining together. This is not a hotel. You don't have a cook. So everybody is pitching in. Everybody's doing their part. No way in hell am I doing this, you know? And actually, they stepped up really, really well. It was great to have everyone here, but I really appreciated that they all acted like adults and stepped up, took turns, did work. It was great. A lot of people did the dishes that weren't me. I did too, but it's not my jam. So, anyway, but at any rate, think about that. Go find a class, go find something. I'm seriously considering taking online singing lessons. This is going to shake my household up. I am not known for having a lovely singing voice, but I've always wanted to. My sisters can sing. They both have absolutely beautiful voices. They have both performed many, many times. They are frequently asked to sing together in places, and I'm so freaking jealous because I so wish that was me. But alas, it's not the voice I've had. But who knows? Just maybe I'll find some online singing lessons right now and blow them out of the water. Or I won't, or whatever. But again, good time to be creative. If you've had a guitar sitting around for the last 6 years, swearing to God at some time you are going to learn how to use it. Use it, right? Take a lesson. Start figuring it out. Build up those calluses. I don't know. But if you do something, tell me about it. I would love to know what you guys are learning online, what you're doing right now. That is one way we can make some lemonade out of lemons right now, I think. So, kind of fun stuff. All righty. Well, with all of that being said, I'm going to take a refresh here on the chat room. For some reason, it doesn't always refresh, and I discover that I have missed things. All right. With all of that being said, I do want to let you know that Christy and I's latest podcast is live. And this week, we talked about the vanishing of Lord Lucan. Who the hell is Lord Lucan? Well, he was a British aristocrat who in 1974 murdered the nanny and he did. Murdered the nanny and seriously injured his estranged wife. Apparently, he thought she was the nanny and he killed her. And so we did a story about that because then, of course, he vanished and has never been credibly seen, actually, at least hasn't been caught. So that was the true crime paranormal story that Christy and I covered this week. You can find that. You can find true crime paranormal all over the place. Whatever podcast you listen to is True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters. You can also find it on YouTube if you'd rather watch it than listen to it. And I put a link in the chat room if you would like to watch it. So I want to make sure that you guys hear about that because, first of all, we are having a blast with these. And second of all, you guys have given us some awesome ideas. The idea for the Lord Lucan story came from our very own Caroline Nettle, who happens to be amazing. You guys know her. She's an advisor at 12 Listen, coming up as a guest soon over at 12 News as well. And I'm really excited that she shared that with me because I didn't know anything about it, though some of you guys maybe did. So anyway, that's what's going on in the true crime paranormal world. I have to say that since we started doing this true crime paranormal podcast, I have been down the rabbit hole of so many cases. honestly, at some point here soon, Christy and I probably need to just do a bonus track and talk a little more about the missing children case that's going on in my county right now, because there's been a ton of movement on that here in the last little short while. I'm not going to get into all of it right now, but there's some crazy stuff that has happened. So, um, I would spend the whole show talking about it, and I was here to uplift you today. So I'm not going to, but you can watch for that with us. I think we'll do an update on that story soon. So anyway, there you go. All righty. Well, let's get into our topic. I'm seeing that some of you guys are giving me some of your lovely stuff, which I really appreciate. Some of your stories. Jane said she's the same way about singing. Can't, but really wants to. By God, Jane, we're going to take singing lessons. Yes, we are. I think I could be better. I do. I don't know. I know my breath support is probably my biggest problem, but hey, this is probably a good time to expand that, right? Give those old lungs a good workover. Anna said she wants to learn piano, and she thinks there's an app for that she can use on her iPad. Oh, Anna, that would be wonderful. I really missed the boat on the piano. We had a piano growing up, and my mother begged us to take singing or piano lessons, and I said no because I'm dumb. The same way she begged me to get braces, and I said no because I was dumb, you know? But I did take clarinet lessons from 7th grade all the way through high school, and competed and played the clarinet all over the place and played into my first year of college. And then when my kids started band, I discovered that it is not like riding a bike, and I did not know how to play the clarinet. I mean, I could put it in my mouth and make noise, and I remembered some notes, but it was going to require a lot more learning than I realized. So I guess if you don't use it, maybe you lose it. So I guess I could start working on clarinet again, but I don't really want to. So Belle is an opera singer. Oh, Belle. I would run these pigs right out of this house. Probably. Maybe. Maybe not. Thank you, though. You are the best. And I love that you're an opera singer. I would love to hear you sing. Okay. Mary's thinking about the piano as well. Well, anyway, I could have learned. I could have learned. Yep. I should have learned. But young and dumb, guys, what do we do? It wasn't cool. In hindsight, neither was playing the clarinet. So what the hell do I know? Oh, well, what do I do not know much. That seems to be the problem. All right. Well, let's get into our topic. I just really thought I was thinking about some of my ancestors, like I said. And again, if you guys want to share any of your ancestors with me, I would cherish that. And I will share their stories here today on the show. I was just thinking about all of the toughies that came before us, you know? We weren't always this privileged. In fact, we forget how privileged we are. So, the first ancestor I want to talk about today, her name is Hannah Molland. If you saw my promo for this show over on my Facebook page, then you saw a photo of her. Unfortunately, I can't share pictures in the chats of YouTube or of the live stream. I wish I could and I would share a picture, but I can't. So I'll probably go back later and do that. But at any rate, Hannah Molland. So Hannah Molland she is a great grandmother, but I didn't count up how many generations back, but it's quite a few, probably 6. So Hannah Molland was born in Liverpool, England in 1838 to a family that was Christian, quite religious. And however, well, anyway, when they weren't a wealthy family, but they weren't necessarily poor. It sounds like they were kind of a middle class era family for the time. She actually, as a late teen and early 20s, she worked at a silk factory, which I found this personally to be fascinating because when I was in college, I took a trip to England and we went to a silk factory and I was absolutely enthralled. I didn't want to leave. And all of the old pictures on the walls absolutely grabbed my attention. I was so into that place. It was such an amazing experience. I didn't know. This was Hannah. This was her heritage. So she worked in a silk factory where she became so proficient with working with silk that she became a position of head lady. Uh, in her early 20s, her family met Mormon missionaries that had come over from the US and converted their family to Mormonism. So she wanted to come to America and really be a part of the LDS church here. So she worked hard and saved her money, and when she was 24, she put down her money to be able to travel to the US. It was $300. Think about how much $300 was in 1838. Yeah, or they said $300 in our genealogy, but I would suppose that wasn't actually dollars. I don't know if it was pounds in 1838 in England. Anyway, probably comparable to $300. Anyway, so 15 other young girls who also had converted to the Mormon church and were heading to what they thought was Zion got on a boat. They had a miserable ride from hell all the way to New York. It was bumpy, people were sick, it was stinky, it was the worst. But what can they do, right? They're on the boat. They made the best of it. There were times that the boat rocked so hard that it actually knocked people out of their bunks. They had to be really careful because when the boat would rock, their trunks would sometimes skitter from one side of the boat to the other side of where they were being held and would injure people. It wasn't fun, but they had a goal in mind. They got to New York City about the middle of July, and that was after a 6-week ride, guys. 6-week ride. Can you imagine? Yeah. And quite a bit of that time, because it had been so stormy, they had spent in their cabins, or I guess I don't know if they call it their cabins, but indoor, being safe, with many a time that they couldn't cook because the weather didn't allow it, and they were living on hardtack, which was like an old molasses kind of candy. If you've ever had hardtack, it's gross, but anyway, so I'm sure they were very grateful to see land and get off the boat. Where they were headed to Zion, so they got a train and headed to Mississippi. The trains had no comforts and no upholstered seats. They basically were just riding on hard benches. There was no beds, nothing. They were just on this train. There was no water on the train. So every time the train stopped, they would get off and take every receptacle they had and fill it up with water so that they would be able to have enough water to get to the next stop. I'm curious to know how they went to the bathroom. Probably don't want to know, but that's what they did. It was extremely hot outside. It was a very hot summer. So they went straight to St. Louis. When they got to St. Louis, there was an outbreak of cholera. And the party they were traveling in, many people got ill and some of them died. So that was kind of how their trip had begun. I don't know if anyone died on their boat. I would say it's probably safe to assume that some people did or were very ill, because traveling at that time via boat was actually really, really perilous. And again, these are young girls that are traveling, trying to get to where they think is where they're supposed to be, but it seemed to be quite miserable. From St. Louis, they traveled on a steamship across the Mississippi River, up the Missouri River to Florence, Nebraska. They thought that there was housing for them in Florence, Nebraska, but when they got there, they discovered that there was not. There was nothing. And they ended up basically camping in tents for a while, which, that's kind of where they were headed, whether they realized it or not, once they hit their wagon train. But again, the conditions were not good. It was extremely hot. They thought that there were going to be people there that basically would take care of them and help them, and that wasn't really the case. So there was a man there that had a steamer with a wagon and a team, and they put the sickest people in the wagon. Everyone else had to walk. And they walked and walked and walked until they got to a stable where the government used to keep horses, and they stayed in it for a little while where they could sleep in the straw. I know, Kind of sounds a little like baby Jesus right here. Anyway, uh, they stayed there for a bit until they were ready to go. And then they stayed there for 3 weeks. It was a horrible time. It was full of flies. It was really gross. There was a lot of sickness that happened during that time as well. There were children that died while in the company that they were with while they were staying at Florence, which makes you wonder, if that was from the flies, the mosquitoes, what kind of illness was there, but people were quite sick. So they were finally ready to move on to Omaha, Nebraska to get provisions to head to Salt Lake City. So that's what they did. So they ended up in a wagon train of people that went from there. They walked for 5 months. No, they didn't. Sorry. It took 5 months from the time Hannah left England to get to Salt Lake City. So she was on the boat for 6 weeks. So anyway, take the rest of that time in traveling, mostly walking and sometimes riding in a wagon to get to Salt Lake City. So when she got to Salt Lake, she married a man. She became the second wife of Joseph Henry Byington. Had a first wife and a big family, and she and Joseph Henry went on to have 8 children. Some of those children died from diphtheria. Diphtheria was a huge problem uh, during that time, and when the children would get diphtheria, it was nearly always deadly. In her life history, it says that after a few days of a terrible fever, little bodies would lay lifeless, covered with the ugly pock marks of diphtheria. She nursed her children, neighbor children. She was known to be good with working with sick children and helping them. But at any rate, she watched a lot of children die, hers and many others, from diphtheria. And yet she kept going. Her husband ended up in prison for being a polygamist because it was actually had been ruled illegal at the time. And yet on she marched. Her husband and his other wife, their family lived on a farm that was about 100 miles away. And he traveled back and forth. They never knew if he was going to come home or when. They lived a lot of their time in serious poverty. They had neighbors that helped them out, but she was basically in charge of everything from slaughtering animals to growing gardens to keeping a little farm going to earning any money they could. She was a school teacher, and that's what she did to keep her family afloat. And I have enormous respect for her. Now, it gets obviously there's a religious aspect here because that's the story of my family, that isn't really my story, but it's theirs, so it is my story. But I have enormous respect for Hannah because she continued on when life was hard. She continued to push forward. In her life history, there's such lovely quotes about what a kind woman she was, how helpful she was. If there was a neighbor in need, she was right there. Eventually, her father died in England, and her mother actually made the trek and made it here, all the way to where I am, where Hannah was, and lived here for about 12, 13 years with Hannah. And Hannah took care of her through the end of her life, of course, as well as all of these children. And Hannah died when she was 51, which, for the time, she was not old, but probably getting older. I mean, we're talking about still the 1800s. And she left quite the legacy of strong women to come. And so to her, I have great respect for all that she went through and for the person that she was. She was beloved by everyone who knew her. Pretty special. A big story in her. And I've told this story lots of times, so I won't today, but she's also my spirit guide and has been for about the last, 8 years. Yeah, I work with her very closely, and she's pretty freaking amazing. So I also wanted to tell you about my Aunt Olive. My Aunt Olive was born in the early 1900s, 1913, I believe. And she was married. She had a large family. She had a very unhappy marriage. Relatives will say that her husband was quite abusive and that everyone in the family basically knew that. But at the time, there was just not a whole lot that anyone did about that. But he died quite young. He died when he was in his late 40s. And Great Aunt Olive was a widow for a very long time. And a miracle happened to Olive when she was 74 years old. Olive met a man named Mitchell. Mitchell was quite a bit older than her, 15 years older than her. When Olive was 74 years old, she fell in love with the love of her life, I believe, and married Mitchell. Mitchell was 89. 89. When I was a kid, they would roll up to the family reunions in a 1950s convertible Cadillac and pitch a tent and camp. These old people, Mitchell was in his 90s, and everybody would be trying to, get them to come and stay in their camper or give them a bed. No, they were happy. And were they happy? They were so cute and sweet together. It was always just a miracle to me, an amazing thing. I think that probably Olive thought that she would never find love. I think that she probably thought that she didn't have another opportunity for love at that point in her life, and yet she married Mitchell. Mitchell lived to be 105 years old. They were married for 16 happy years before Mitchell passed. Olive lived for about 5 years after, and then she transitioned as well. But for that 16 years, she got to have the love of a lifetime. And isn't that miraculous? And her story is just, I think, so inspiring that we are never too old for love. We're never too old for miracles. We're never too old for something amazing to happen. What a beautiful story about Aunt Olive. I've always loved that. For as long as I ever knew Olive, she had stark white hair. And I saw a picture of her earlier today when I was looking at her death dates and marriage dates to try to get things straight. And apparently, once upon a time, her hair was black, black, black. And it turned absolutely stark white. And it was for as long as I ever remembered her. But anyway, that's a story that always just really touches me. Very sweet one. My grandma Betty had a set of twins. She had a set of twins, by the way, I put a picture in the chat room of an old log cabin. That little cabin is where Hannah Molland raised 8 children. Yep, 8 children. Those kids with diphtheria, those kids with all of their issues. Well, not all of it. They didn't have a lot of issues. That sounded not right. But that's where she raised that large families in that very tiny cabin right there. Anyway, my grandma Betty, my dad's mom, my grandma Betty was pregnant with her second child. This was during World War II. It was when so many things were rationed. And I think about that now and I'm like, wow, did they have to ration things because fools ran out and bought it all up? I don't know. It gives a different meaning to all of this stuff right now, doesn't it? But at any rate, Grandma Betty had a baby. Well, everything was rationed at that time. And so she had received the amount of fabric you were allowed to have. You were allowed to have a certain amount of flannel to sew the baby's bunting. What was the bunting? Well, the diapers, the clothes, the blankets. You got a certain amount of flannel to make those things. Well, lo and behold, Betty had 2 babies. They didn't know she was having 2 babies. It was a complete surprise. And that time, when you had a baby, you were required to lay flat on your back for 10 days. That was the belief, that you had to lay flat on your back for 10 days to avoid bleeding to death. So, we know a little different now. She was always amazed that I would have a C-section and be out of the hospital like the next day, because not for her. At any rate, 2 babies, 1 bunting. As luck had it, her sister Mary was in charge of the fabric rations. She was a professional seamstress, and this had become her job. She was in charge of the fabric rations, and so she was able to make an emergency pull from the rations to get enough stuff for a second baby. And while Betty and the babies were still in the hospital, she sewed a second bunting so that she would have enough stuff to take care of the 2 babies where she was expecting just 1. Those little boys were redheaded They were precious. They were terrors and got in more trouble than you can imagine. Well, that's what twins do. Those two boys are now 74 years old and are uncles of mine that will still tease you into oblivion if you let them. But anyway, she survived them, but she also survived a time of rations when water, or not water, the flour, sugar, salt, lots of other things, and fabric. You couldn't just go have whatever you wanted. It was rationed. And again, sometimes I go, well, you know, maybe we understand why now, right? But whatever. I adored her. I could always call her and ask her how to do something. When I started raising chickens, I don't have chickens anymore, but we did for years. And when I started raising chickens, she and one of my other grandmas were full of help and advice because they'd raised chickens forever. They knew what to do. They knew how to save a baby chicken that was hurt or that was, not doing well. They also knew how to slaughter chickens, something I never did learn how to do because I'm a wuss, right? They did it themselves. They would have the day where you slaughtered all of the chickens, you processed all of them, and you put them all in the freezer or you cooked them and bottled them. They did that too. They raised enormous gardens and processed that food. They bottled it, they dried it, later on probably froze some of it, but they had enormous cellars or pantries where all of that stuff would go because that was literally what they would feed their families on. It wasn't so easy to just trot off to the store every few days and grab everything you needed, at least way back when. But they did that. They did that no problem because that's what you did to survive. That's what you did to take care of their families. They learned how to do those things from their parents. As kids, of course, they were expected to help and be in charge of things like that. They had to know how to survive. We have it so easy these days. And I'm not putting a guilt trip on anybody for that. I like having it easy, but we've lost a lot. We're being asked to survive by laying on the damn couch, and most of us can't do that. So I don't know what to say about us. I want to share with you a few of your relatives as well. So I am thinking this was from Jane yesterday, wasn't it, Jane? If this was not you, correct me. I'm quite sure it is. She said, I have an aunt by marriage named Hildegard Martin. Hildegard Martin. She has passed, but she lost her first husband and 22-month-old baby in a concentration camp. My uncle was a part of the U.S. troops that occupied Germany and freed the camps. He fell in love with her. She had two other older kids in safe hiding. My uncle was 20 years old and she was older. My uncle returned to the U.S. and spent time getting a bill passed in order for U.S. servicemen to be able to bring back war wives. They had one baby boy, Albert, who had leukemia. They were devoted Jehovah's Witnesses. This was in the 50s, and they wouldn't allow a blood transfusion, and he died before the age of 7. I only met her a few times as a child, but had such an intense feeling when she was around. One of the times we met was when they came to ask my parents if they could adopt my younger brother. He's baby number 9 of 9 children, and born 9 children born in 11 years. Okay, scrap that out. 9 babies in 11 years, bro. 9. My dad was disabled after a neck injury had paralyzed him. He was rehabilitated, but I never knew my dad prior to the paralysis, and I understand he was much nicer prior. Anyway, my parents were horrified at the request and, of course, said no. My uncle is 90 years old now and still alive in Arizona. Hilda passed some years ago. I always wished I'd gone and interviewed her as an adult. When the Russians occupied Germany after the war, the soldiers raped young tween girls, and when they came for Hilda's sister, she stepped in and offered herself. She got pregnant, and that baby got sent to family in another part of Germany. I don't think she had contact with that child again. She also worked for the Russians as a secretary/clerk. It was mandatory during the Russian occupation of Germany. She had a life of such devastating experiences, but was the lightest person in the room. Such joy emanated from her. I hope she is at peace now. Wow. Thank you for sharing that with us, what she experienced and lived through. And yet, again, learn joy, right? Found a play to find joy, even in darker or harsher circumstances. What an incredible person. What an incredible story. Okay. I am going to look through the chat room really quick. I know we had a few stories. Renee said, my grandmother was from Canada. I remember the day her children brought her a microwave, the new oven that had just came out. I thought, here is a woman that started life using a wood stove, then a gas stove, then an electric stove, and now a microwave. She would only use it for warming up leftovers or water for tea, and I carry on that tradition. I love that. My grandma, when she died, not that long ago, like 8 years ago, she had, I swear to God, the first microwave she ever had. I was afraid that standing in front of that was definitely going to take an x ray. Yeah, so funny. Okay. Jane said, my great grandma Ida Long lost her mom and 5 siblings in the 1918 pandemic. She was raised by her dad and aunt. She was the only surviving child, but apparently her father had his own business and took her to see Broadway type shows. My mom has lovely memories of this woman who was her mom. Roberta Long's mom. Wow. So chew on that. Lost 5 siblings and her mom in the 1918 pandemic. Wow. That's not going to happen to us. We're very lucky, we're very, very lucky. And yet, what can we do right now, right? We can be smart, we can be safe, we can love each other, we can be resilient. Those are the things we can do. But I love that we are honoring those who came before us, who lived in extremely challenging times and found ways to make it happen, right? Found ways to be, if we remember them at all, or looking through their journals or looking through their life histories, someone who meant the world to somebody else. I think these stories are so amazing. Yeah. Let's see. Hold on. I'm going to scroll down here. Yes. Yes, Jane said that was her. Thank you so much, Jane, for that story. I loved it. All right. Julie says, my paternal grandfather was a twin. He and his sister were born prematurely. They were put in shoe boxes and kept warm in a wood burning cook stove. Yeah, in the warming drawer. Yep. Many amazing things happened to him. Can you guys imagine putting your baby in the stove? Right? But they had these warming drawers and they had to keep an eye on the stove and make sure it didn't get too hot or too cold. But that's where they would keep the babies warm. You think that you have anxiety putting your baby to bed at night, right? I can't imagine that. It's probably DNA in us now. Anyway, many amazing things happened to him during his life. My grandfather worked on an oil lease for many years. He fell off a tall ladder and broke his leg. He was also stung by a swarm of hornets another time. He fell down a flight of stairs and was kicked by a bull and hit in the back of the head with a tree branch. To top it all off, he was struck by lightning. He was not a tall man, but he was tough as a boot. He survived all of these things and transitioned in his 80s. Wow. Holy cow, Julie. I had an aunt, my Aunt Zelda, which, come on, is there a cooler name? Well, Aunt Zelda was struck by lightning twice. Once in the cow barn, they were having a horrible storm, and she ran out there to make sure that the cattle were secure in their pen, not the barn. Well, in the barn, in the pen. Anyway, and was actually struck by lightning. And my Uncle Merrill, her husband, was there and gathered her up. But yeah, she was okay. But actually later in life, she was struck by lightning again in their pasture. Yeah. Why do some people get struck by lightning? Okay. I got to go back up in the chat here in the live stream. Belle had shared a story. She said, my Nana was a teen in Germany during World War II. Her family ran the only bakery in Offenbach after several bombings. She used to sneak bread to non-party homes, knowing if she got caught, she would be beaten, jailed, and possibly killed. She moved to the U.S. in 1945, learned English in 6 months, and went on to be a nurse in the Army, and later was a head nurse on the first heart transplant team ever. Wow, Belle, how amazing. How amazing. We could sneak bread to our neighbors right now and not even go to jail for it, but we're not doing it. Well, maybe some of you are. Then again, maybe we keep our germs at home. But yet again, such an amazing opportunity for all of us right now to serve, but also to learn, right? Kate says, taking this time to grow my own herbs and medicine and food, really hoping I can get a crystal ball for my birthday and start scrying. That would be awesome, Kate. And good on you. I know not everybody can grow a big garden. I get it. I think we all just, this is a time that we can learn a little bit about being resilient. I hope that before, at this point, knowing that we should be really limiting our access to going into stores and things like that, that whenever a need arises, that we stop for a minute and consider what we could do instead, what we could make, what we could recycle, what we could do with rather than that trip into town or to the store, right? Since we're trying to limit, trying to stay as quarantined as possible, and it's possible in some of your communities, you're locked down even a little more than that. But my grandma didn't go buy anything. I mean, she did, but first it was always, I mean, the woman didn't have a Tupperware container, you guys. You guys know what I'm talking about. Her Tupperwares were Cool Whip containers, margarine tubs, everything food came in. She stored jars too. That's what you put stuff in. You didn't waste stuff. You didn't throw it away. It didn't go in the recycling bin. You washed it up and you put it in the cupboard, and by God, you used it. I'm not saying you have to do that, but I think that right now, let's all take a little time here in this next little bit to take a look at our ancestors. If there are family histories written about them, if there's not, maybe this is a good opportunity for you to do it. But let's consider what our ancestors have been through in their lives. I'm not saying that what we're going through is benign in comparison. I'm not trying to say that what we're going through doesn't matter. Not at all. What I want you to remember, and me too, is that we are made of tough stuff. We came from people that lived through extraordinary times and made it through extraordinary hardships and still managed to create love and joy and creativity in their lives, and we can too. That is it for today. We have done it. Thank you all so much for being here. I want to let you know that you can find me over at 12listen.com every day as a professional psychic advisor doing readings, energy work, mediumship, animal communication. I'll help you in any way that I can. And of course, you can always find more out about me over at katie-weaver.com. Thank you all so, so much for being here. Have a great rest of your day. Please stay tuned. There's one more great show to come here today, here on 12 Radio. You have been listening to the Katie Weaver Show here on 12 Radio, where we're changing the way you listen to the world.